Good morning, good afternoon, students. I wanted to make this recording so you had this information in an easily accessible place, even though we're going to go over this live in all of our classes on Thursday and Friday. So for our final exam, as I'm going to walk you through here, midterm exam, excuse me, we are going to present you with an option. You can either sit down and take a midterm exam, as would kind of normally be the case, or you have an option to do a project, as I'll explain, either individually or in a small group of up to 3 students. Uh, the due date for the project or the exam will be on the date that your class sits for an exam. It will be due prior to that exam period if you are doing the project. If you're doing the exam, obviously it will be due at the end of that exam period. Let's walk through it right now. So again, your two options will be to sit for an exam where you're going to have probably about 75 multiple choice questions and one short answer question, probably from a choice of maybe 2 or 3 options. That will be due at the end of the period that you sit for your exam. If you choose this option, this will look no different likely than what you're used to in your previous 2 years here at Cardinal Gibbons. The project that I'm offering you, a project-based learning opportunity, is going to be explained here in the next couple slides, and it will be due, as I said, the day your class sits to take an exam. It must be submitted prior to the exam period for your class. Let's walk through it, okay? So the project option will be kind of like a podcast. Is kind of my vision here, but with a screen recording, kind of like a screencast. You can do a Zoom recording as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. So it's kind of like a broadcast. And you are going to have 2 components here. One, you're going to discuss, analyze, and generalize the major themes of American history between 1607 and 1800. So that would be to say the first 3 time periods of the APUSH curriculum. And secondly, a further choice embedded here, you're going to either analyze some and discuss and answer some College Board-like questions based on the first 3 time periods, or you're going to predict some of what will be witnessed in time period 4, which we already began discussing in class. So I want to walk you through those specifics now. So again, you can work individually, okay? But you can also work in groups of up to 3 students. So 1 student, 2 student, or 3 students will produce this project. You can have kind of like a host and a guest format, as like a podcast would, if any of you guys are like podcast folks. But all students must participate equally, okay? You are going to choose 2 of the following slides to address in your project, 1 from each part that I described previously. And as I said, I'm going to go into further detail here in a second. You must address each slide that you select in the manner that I specify. You must have a production that's, our target time here is about 10 to 15 minutes. I've already gone over the due dates, okay, on your exam period date. Prior to your exam time period, if you're doing the project, that gives me an opportunity to make sure they're all in during the exam period, okay? Or if you're doing the test, you're just going to sit down and take the test. We will have an entire week of work and or study time next week, the week that ends with the remote learning day on Friday, December 11th. So here's part 1 of your broadcast podcast, give it a name, okay? Where you are going to be working on the essential questions or the most significant factors. You are going to choose 1 of the following 2 slides for part 1 of your project. The first one here is the essential question. So this is kind of your Q&A, your discussion, okay, as it relates to time periods 1 through 3. That's 1607 to 1800 in American history. Set number 1, you're going to be talking about the factors and specifics causing discontent between the English and their colonies. All those factors that, right, when I put up the Cartman image, pissed off the colonists so much that they just had to declare independence. You want to identify why were the early colonial regions culturally and economically, why is that significant? So what are those regions? You got to define that and explain why they're significant. And then we want to look ahead, given kind of what we know about time period 4 and general knowledge of American history moving forward. Why is the emergence of those, or how is the emergence of those regional differences going to affect American history politically, economically, socially? So, what's kind of the lasting impact of these early colonial regions that we've studied, and how does that affect history moving forward beyond time period 3, and how might it affect American culture and society today? Set number 2, okay? So you would either choose the first set that I just described or the second set that I'm about to describe right now. Set number 2 is, what do we mean by the great American contradiction? I hope that's not something new to you right now. We've discussed it at length. The question is, what are the ideals established upon the founding of the United States? And I want you to evaluate to what extent American society fulfills those ideas. So you really want to tackle this question both from an historical perspective and from a perspective of where we sit as a nation today. There's probably more meat on this bone than the questions alone indicate if you've kind of been paying attention to how we've been touching upon these questions throughout the course of this first semester. Okay, so for part 1 of your project, okay, if you choose this slide, you're going to choose one set of these questions. Okay. For part 1 of this project, if you do not choose this slide, then you'll be choosing this slide, where you are going to discuss the most significant factors in early emerging American history. And what I mean by that is you are going to select 4 of the most significant factors. And then you're going to defend through discussion on your podcast broadcast, okay, why you chose these factors and why these factors are, in fact, crucial to understanding American history between 1607 to 1800. You can certainly go beyond 1800 as well and talk about the impact of these factors in early American history, on American culture and society moving forward up through 2020, if you so choose. Okay, and I think you can certainly do that. This is a fascinating topic for discussion. You can choose any factors that you like, but in order to provide you, also students taking a test option, a little bit of a study guide here, I've hyperlinked a list of people, places, and things, a fairly extensive list that touches upon just about everything we have talked about so far this semester, that you should be able to at least identify. And then if you're choosing this option, or to weave the narrative in your studying for the exam, you should be able to expand upon this topic regardless. Okay, so again, that is part 1. You're going to choose either this slide, one set of questions, or this slide, the whole thing. And it's going to be in a conversation in both cases with equal participation among all hosts and guests on your broadcast. Okay, that's part 1. You're going to choose one of those 2 slides. Then you have to complete also part 2, where again, you're going to choose one of the following 2 slides for your broadcast. The first slide, as you see here, encompasses College Board type questions. Now, for this slide, you have to do both time periods 1 and 2 as well as time period 3. For each of those sections, which I've hyperlinked what questions you have, you see the hyperlink here for 1 and 2, you see the hyperlink here for 3. You have to choose 5 multiple choice questions, okay? And for time periods 1 and 2, use at least 2 questions that have stimuli. For time period 3, you're choosing another 5 questions, and you're using at least 3 questions that come with stimuli. For each section, you're choosing 1 short answer question, and you're addressing all 3 portions. Rather than writing about it, you're talking about it. You're doing the same for time period 3. So here you go, right? Here on this slide, you've got to essentially address time periods 1, 2, and 3, tackling what amounts to a 10 total multiple choice questions, okay? Um, at least 5 of which have stimuli divided as you see here and as I just described, okay? And 2 short answer questions that you're kind of going to weave the narrative through in your discussion together. And again, all students should be participating equally in this portion, okay? So this is your first choice. For your second portion, you're going to be tackling both options on this first choice for your second portion. If you choose not to go about this, you don't want to get into discussing your rationale for how you tackle multiple choice questions, then you'll be going outside of time periods 1 through 3, and you're going to be discussing time period 4. Okay. Where again, as we did a little bit with our timeline, you're going to preview the most important factors, actors, facts, and figures of time period 4. That's 1800 to 1848. This is going to be, again, like a podcast, broadcast driven discussion where you want to discuss a preview of time period 4, what major themes are going to drive American history during this time. What do you think are going to become the essential questions? What's something like cool? What are some fascinating anecdotes of history that are impactful, important, and interesting that you look forward to studying in time period 4? Okay. And all the students here have to participate in kind of a round robin format so that all of the students get to tackle kind of all of these questions as you preview time period 4. So again, for the second portion of your project, you are either going to be tackling College Board questions from time periods 1 through 3, or you're giving a pretty impactful preview of time period 4. Okay. And with the selection of 1 slide from part 2, and again, 1 slide from part 1, that will complete your broadcast discussion. So let's talk about how to submit it. Okay. The easiest way to do that, I think, is through Screencastify Submit, and I've hyperlinked an assignment here. You follow the instructions that I have provided in order for you to complete this work, okay? And then you should know how to use Screencastify Submit. I think Screencastify Submit is probably the ideal solution if you are going to be working with other students from your class period in your same color, okay? You can work with students from another color in your class period, but you can't work with students from another class period of mine, okay? So if you're in my 4th period class, you're going to be working with other students in your 4th period. And if you're gold and they're gold, you guys can work together building a Screencastify Submit. If you're gold and your partner or partners are green, I'm still going to allow that option, but perhaps I think the best way to go about that would be by working on a recorded Zoom. If you can safely do a submit because you're already kind of with those kids anyway, you can do a Screencastify Submit. But if you want to work with a friend of yours that's in your section but of another color and you haven't seen them all year, my recommendation for safety purposes is to do a recorded Zoom together. Okay. Now that option, as I say here, might be a little bit trickier, but I think you can still do it. You'll want to probably like record a couple practice Zooms first and make sure that you are proficient in securing your recordings. What you'll see is on my end, what I see is they go into a Zoom folder in your documents folder, I think through your hard drive, and then you've got to kind of download and save it from there. So again, I would practice that option 1 or 2 times with just some simple 1 or 2 minute recordings and make sure you become proficient at that. Okay. But if you're choosing the project option, in either case, I am getting a screen recorded video from you. You guys can absolutely beef up your points on this project by having some images in your background, right? Like a slideshow or something that shows how you're going about this. I would absolutely recommend that. In fact, it's going to be much easier for me to follow, and therefore to kind of like I talk about with our writing, you're kind of beating me over the head with like, hey man, we know our stuff. Not only are we talking about it, but we're showing it to you here. Okay. So that's how you're going to submit your project if you're taking the project-based learning option. I'm certainly around for any questions. Okay. Here's a little bit on our calendar, of course. We're holding this class, obviously, on the Thursday the 3rd and Friday the 4th. And then we're going to have the entire week. So you're going to have at least one class live to work and or study. We've got Friday the 11th as a remote learning day, and I'm here to answer questions and help students out that day. And then we've got our exam periods, as you'll see here, between the 14th and the 17th. You will either sit for your exam that day and be done by the end of the exam period, or you will submit prior, if you're doing the project-based learning, prior to that exam period, okay? All students will at least be on Zoom for the opening of that portion so that I can connect with all students and we can move on from there, okay? So there's a little bit on your exam schedule. You see we're doing periods 2 and 3 on Monday, 7 and 5 on Tuesday, 8 and 4 on Wednesday, 1 and 6 on Thursday, and then we are off for winter break. Enjoy it. I'm asking you to do one more thing, please, before you leave, and I'm asking you to get it done by 5 p.m. this Sunday. That would be Sunday the 6th, okay? Please complete this hyperlinked Google Form survey to help me plan for the midterm. I really need to get a grip on how many students are going to choose the exam option and how many students are going to choose the project-based learning option. I've got some other questions in there for you as well, so I understand, numbers by class period. I understand accommodations that might be required and the whole 9 yards. Okay. Again, we're going to go over this in class on Thursday the 3rd, Friday the 4th, but I wanted to have this recording available to you in case you can't reach me and you do have some questions. That's all I got for you guys. We'll see you this coming up these 2 days and all of our work week next week. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope this all makes sense. Hit me up if it doesn't. Take care. Thanks.